While driving down a deserted road at night, I saw something dart across the road. The road was surrounded by tall trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, giving it an eerie feel. At first, I thought it was an ordinary animal, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. It had the body of a large wolf, but its eyes were glowing with an eerie yellow light. The brightness of the light made my heart skip a beat. I slowed down to get a better look, but the creature disappeared into the darkness. The experience left me feeling unnerved, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. I wondered if the creature was a figment of my imagination or if it was real. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was definitely not a normal animal. Perhaps it was a supernatural being or some kind of mutant. I couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain: I was not ready for the rest of the night. Later that night, I found the perfect spot to camp, a clearing several hundred feet off the road in the woods. After carefully setting up my tent and building a fire, it was dusk already, so I got cozy inside the tent. As I was about to doze off, I heard a faint rustling sound outside. At first, I dismissed it as the wind blowing through the trees. However, the sound persisted and grew louder, and I realized that something was moving around my tent. My heart began to race as I began to ponder if this was a bear, a small animal, or something more dangerous. I couldn't be sure, but I knew I had to stay alert and prepared for anything. I lay there in the darkness, with only the sounds of the night for company, wondering what would happen next. Clinging to my flashlight with the grip of a more primal ancestor, the only object that would work as a reliable weapon. Would the creature outside go away, or would it attack? It had been in the camp for several minutes now and had not investigated my tent yet. As I lay there, anxiety flooded my brain, knowing eventually it would search the tent. Despite trying to calm my nerves and think of a plan, my mind was racing too fast. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the sound stopped, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I knew that I had to remain vigilant if I wanted to make it through the night unscathed. I was unable to sleep much after that, getting a few minutes here and there. But every sound had me on edge now. I was ready for day to come so I could leave. While I was sitting outside the tent tending the fire, which I'd restarted after the earlier experience, I heard a low growling that turned into a blood-curdling howl. The sound was so piercing that it felt as if it was reverberating through my body. My heart racing, I tried to suppress the overwhelming feeling of fear that was creeping in. Chills shot down my spine, and every part of my body told me to run as fast as I could to the car, leave, and never look back. But the howling continued, growing louder and closer with each passing moment. After a single moment of hesitation on my course of action, I was frozen in fear. I could hear the beast, whatever it was. It was as if the creature was circling around the clearing, trying to find a blind spot to attack from, or perhaps just observing, looking back at it now. The sound of claws scratching against the coarse bark of the trees around my camp piqued my anxiety. I finally broke free of my paralysis and armed myself with my flashlight. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of animal was out there, and if I was going to make it out alive. I tried to calm myself down by taking deep breaths, but every time the howling grew louder, my heart would skip a beat. I knew that I had to come up with a plan. Maybe I could make a run for it, or try to scare the animal away with a loud noise. As I tried to think of a way out, the howling continued, sending shivers down my spine. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the howling stopped. There was an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I moved into my tent, too exhausted to care if the beast came back. I awoke before dawn still, but I felt better. I stayed in my tent until the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees. When I emerged from my tent, everything seemed normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. I packed up my camp as quickly as I could and started making my way back out of the clearing, heading towards my car. The ambience of the forest was unnaturally quiet. I picked up my pace some. I was getting anxious being in the same woods as that thing. When I reached my car, I almost wished I hadn't. There was a deer on the hood of my car, ripped open and half-eaten. I was done. I jumped into the car and threw it into reverse, slamming the pedal to the floor. The deer slid off the hood with a small thump on the bumper, as I backed out and got back on the road, determined to put as much distance between myself and those woods. Somehow I didn't get pulled over with all the blood on the car. I got into town and went to the car wash, grabbed a six-pack and headed home. I'm pretty sure I'm selling my camping gear.